The sky burned a deep, bruised purple as a hush fell over the vast plaza in the heart of the Galactic Empire's capital. A towering scaffold had been erected at the center, and on it stood Elena Marlowe, a human bride whose eyes shone with defiant sorrow. Accused of espionage and treachery, she had been framed by the Empire, a cruel spectacle meant to quell dissent and remind the galaxy of their iron grip on power. Elena's white gown, now stained with the dust of the plaza, fluttered in the chill evening wind. The murmurs of the gathered crowd, a mix of subdued citizens and hardened soldiers, melded into a single low hum of apprehension and fear. Behind the public facade of order, the Empire reveled in its brutal display of power, indifferent to the human life they were about to extinguish. Among the onlookers stood a solitary figure whose presence belied his unremarkable appearance. John Carter, a seemingly quiet trader with unassuming eyes, remained at the very edge of the crowd. As the Imperial Herald recited the final condemnations in a cold, mechanized tone, John's gaze never wavered from the condemned woman. In a voice barely audible above the clamor, he murmured a single name, Baba Yaga. The words, steeped in ancient lore and whispered terror, sent a shiver through those who understood their weight. A grizzled veteran, his scales scarred from countless battles, edged closer to John. His eyes widened with a mix of recognition and dread. Baba Yaga, he whispered, the name laced with both respect and warning. The veteran's words, though soft, carried a portent of retribution, a promise that the cruelty unfolding before them would soon be repaid in kind. As the executioner, clad in the gleaming regalia of the Empire, raised his arm to signal the final moment, a sudden ripple of murmurs swept through the assembly. Elena's face remained serene, her eyes locked onto the distant stars beyond the towering structures, a silent plea for a justice that had long eluded humanity. Yet in that moment, as the cold machinery of the Empire delivered its fatal blow, the underlying currents of rebellion stirred. The name Baba Yaga was not one of mere legend, but a harbinger of a wrath soon to be unleashed upon the tyrants. The plaza, once filled with the oppressive cadence of the Empire's decree, now pulsed with the energy of imminent revolt. In the hushed aftermath of the execution, the whispered name Baba Yaga ignited a spark, a promise that Elena's sacrifice would not be in vain. Humanity, resilient and defiant, was about to awaken from its long, silent slumber and rise once more to reclaim its dignity and freedom. And in that charged silence, as the Empire celebrated its grim victory, an unspoken understanding spread among the gathered souls. The reckoning was near, the blood oath of Baba Yaga. John Carter disappeared the night his wife was executed. The Galactic Empire, bloated with arrogance, assumed he was just another grieving husband, powerless, broken, and lost. They were wrong. Far from the sterile opulence of the imperial capital, John resurfaced in the seediest corners of the galaxy. He moved like a ghost through the underworld, where slavers, warlords, and mercenaries thrived in the Empire's shadow. His name was a whisper at first, a rumor exchanged in dimly lit cantinas and back-alley dens. But soon, the whispers carried weight. Baba Yaga was awake. John started small. He struck at supply depots, sabotaged key infrastructure, and assassinated mid-level officials. He worked alone at first, leaving behind bodies as messages, throats slit with surgical precision, imperial insignias impaled on blades. The killings were methodical, clinical, no unnecessary brutality, no wasted effort. But to those who found the aftermath, it was terrifying in its efficiency. The Empire tried to dismiss the incidents as isolated, the work of common criminals or insurgents. Then, their own enforcers started disappearing. Entire squads went missing, their ships found drifting in deep space, their crews gutted like animals. The underworld took notice. One night, in a darkened cantina on the outlaw planet of Ismar 9, John met with an old acquaintance, a scarred human named Rourke, a former Special Forces operative who had long since traded duty for credits. Rourke stared into his drink, then at the man before him. "I thought you were done," Rourke muttered, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. John's reply was quiet, but it carried the weight of a promise. The Empire thought so too. Rourke smirked. He knew the look in John's eyes. It was the same cold determination that had made him a legend during the Human Imperial War, a war that had ended with humanity's defeat and their forced subjugation under the Empire's rule. But war never truly ended. Some fires never died. Within weeks, the old team was back together, veterans, assassins, operatives who had faded into obscurity after the war. They gathered under John's banner, not for glory or wealth, but for vengeance. Then, the real work began. Weapons caches were raided. Black market arms dealers found themselves doing business with a ghost. Military outposts were infiltrated, their defenses bypassed like they never existed. Empire-controlled planets started seeing their governors' heads on spikes, with the words, "You should have let her live," carved into the walls. The Galactic Empire had faced insurgencies before, but this was different. This was not rebellion. This was not war. This was a hunt. And Baba Yaga was coming. The wrath of humanity. The first true blow fell on the Imperial stronghold of Beltar Prime. It was meant to be an impenetrable fortress, a symbol of the Empire's absolute dominance. But when the sun rose, its towers lay in ruins, its command center a crater of smoldering wreckage. Entire garrisons had been wiped out in the night, their bodies arranged in precise, calculated displays of horror. The message was clear. Baba Yaga was here. Panic spread like wildfire through the Empire's ranks. High-ranking officials, once secure in their ivory towers, began reinforcing their security, surrounding themselves with guards. Entire fleets were mobilized to hunt the ghost haunting their worlds. But John Carter did not fight like a rebel. He did not fight like an army. He fought like a legend. John struck at supply chains, turning the Empire's war machine against itself. Munitions transports were rerouted to empty space and detonated before they could reach the front lines. Key generals were found dead in their private chambers, their security systems untouched. Propaganda networks, once churning out messages of Imperial supremacy, now played intercepted footage of John's operations, proof that the once invincible Empire was bleeding. The Empire had conquered thousands of worlds. Now, it found itself unable to hold them. Other species, long oppressed under the Emperor's rule, saw the cracks forming and took up arms. The Aztari, whose homeworld had been reduced to a factory planet, led uprisings in the outer sectors. The Threxian war bands, once broken and scattered, began launching raids on Imperial convoys. And humanity, beaten, subjugated, but never truly broken, rose again. On the jungle moon of Kalar, 6, a battalion of Imperial shock troops found themselves ambushed by human insurgents. Their leader, a hulking reptilian commander, had laughed when he first heard of Baba Yaga. He wasn't laughing when John Carter emerged from the shadows. The fight was over in minutes. The Imperial forces were torn apart with ruthless precision, and the commander, once so confident in his own strength, found himself on his knees, staring up at the man who had become his nightmare. John leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell your Emperor what you saw here." The commander trembled. What are you?" John's eyes, cold and unyielding, bore into him. Vengeance. The commander lived, but his spirit had been broken. He returned to the Imperial capital, carrying a warning that sent shivers down the Emperor's spine. For the first time in history, the Galactic Empire felt fear. Their enemy was not a rebellion, not an army, not a nation. It was a man, and he was coming for them. The fall of the Empire. The Imperial Palace stood like a monument to the Empire's arrogance, its golden spires piercing the night sky. It had weathered wars, revolts, and assassination attempts, but it had never faced him. Inside, Emperor Havex V sat upon his throne, surrounded by his elite guard. His face was a mask of forced calm, but his clawed fingers gripped the armrests too tightly. Reports of destruction, rebellion, and death had flooded his chambers for weeks. Entire sectors were in open revolt. Governors were abandoning their posts, and the name Baba Yaga had become a death sentence. Now he was here. The palace alarms had been silent. No explosions, no marching armies, only the distant sound of bodies hitting the floor. Then the throne room doors opened. John Carter stepped inside, alone. His black tactical suit bore no insignia, no flag. He moved with the slow, measured grace of a predator who had already won. Behind him, the bodies of the Emperor's finest warriors lay motionless, their throats cut, their weapons still in their hands. The remaining guards hesitated, their grip on their weapons faltering. They had seen what happened to those who stood in his way. The Emperor rose, forcing himself to glare down at the human before him. "Do you think killing me will change anything?" he spat. "The Empire is eternal." John tilted his head slightly. "Your empire died the moment you touched my wife." The Emperor bared his fangs. "She was nothing." John moved. The Emperor's words had barely left his mouth before John was on him. The throne room erupted into chaos, guards lunging, weapons flashing, but John was faster. A knife flashed in his hand, slicing through armor and flesh like paper. He was not a soldier. He was not an assassin. He was a force of nature. One by one, the guards fell, their bodies crumpling to the floor until only the Emperor remained. Havex scrambled backward, his bravado gone, replaced by sheer terror. John loomed over him, blood dripping from his blade. "Look at you," he said, his voice cold. "You rule the stars, yet here you are, cowering." Havex gasped, his chest heaving. "Please name your price." "Power? Wealth? You can have it all." John knelt beside him, lowering his voice to a whisper. "You took the only thing I ever wanted." He pressed the blade to the Emperor's throat. "And now I'll take everything from you." But he didn't kill him. Instead, he broadcasted the Emperor's defeat across the Empire. The mighty ruler, groveling at the feet of a single human. It was not an execution. It was an execution of his power. By morning, the Empire was gone. Its people rose in rebellion. Its army surrendered. And as John Carter vanished into the void, the last message he left behind was simple. "You should have let her live.